Good evening. Happy Shabbat. Welcome to Yada Yahweh Radio. Our pleasure to be with you. We've got a full cast of characters with Kirk, JB, and with Larry. Hello, fellas.
Hey. Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
Oh, good. You know, I just caught in the news that the boys from Black Lives Matter just can't catch a break. You know, they began all this with that kid in Ferguson, Missouri, that was, you know, he shouldn't have been shot dead, but that Wilson killed Brown, I think he was his last name, after he beat up a convenience store clerk and stole cigars so that he could load them with his favorite brand of marijuana. And of course, the autopsy showed that he was literally charging the cop. And so they really had a bum that they were trying to immortalize, and the whole, you know, don't shoot, hands up, that didn't work so well. So they started off in a rough way. And then with these last two now, there's riots in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so they got returned today on the guy who was killed. And according to what the police are saying, he not only had a gun, but his blood's on the gun. His gun was loaded. And so it's not looking so good on that one. And of course, the other one, the guy was the reason he was wandering aimlessly is though we don't have the toxicology report, they say they found PCP in his car, and he had a long rap sheet in terms of convictions and a 10-year prison sentence for drug trafficking. So,
yeah, just a plethora of heroes, aren't they? And
oh man,
and of course,
man, neither you or I are on the side of the police here. I mean, we realize that
no,
the police
not at all.
you know, that both people are dead because they would not follow the police's orders, and both of us agree that police should not be able to order somebody to put their hands up. They should not be able to deprive a citizen of their freedom unless that citizen is actively engaged harming others. In this case, they were not. So the police should not have that right. We're opposed to the power that they've been given. We're disgusted that their first option is a gun and that they kill people for not obeying their orders. All of that's repulsive. But
by the way, that I want to point something out here.
African community, you'd think that after a while you'd find somebody that's worthwhile to rally around. There's only one that I've heard of so far, and that was the kid Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old, and nobody wants to rally around him. I don't.
No, I saw one down in Texas, a retarded guy that was sitting in front of his home. His parents were filming it all, and two cops got out and started arguing with him, and one of them got picked up a gun and shot him. I went, my God, I would have shot the cop if I'd have been there. I really would have. I'd have went in my house, got a gun, I'd have shot the cop. I just, you know, there are instances of it. We know that the police are basically garbage men for who? The scribes. And what are we told about the scribes? Nothing good. Yes. And so
fact, we're gonna read a passage where Yah was talking about the city of Jerusalem, and is going to talk about the political and military and religious establishment there, and going to say they're just a bunch of whores. But that's what we're experiencing here in America.
Yeah, well, I want to point one other thing out here. Here's the problem with Black Lives Matter and all the other racially charged and racially motivated groups. The answer is always more money. Mm-hmm. You can't fix a moral problem with money.
Right.
Yeah, well, the government, vis-a-vis, let's get funded by government and give up more rights for more of this paper. And the other problem is the statistics. You know, they talk about blacks being killed at this high percentage. Well, guess what? They commit that percentage of the crime. And as an example, whites commit 46% of violent crime in America. Guess at what rate they're killed at in arrest? You know, when you look at the overall deaths, 48%.
Right.
So you see, they you know, when it comes down to the police department, and we all know police will lie for each other. I mean, anybody that doesn't believe that has been living in a cave.
Their primary go-to strategy is always to lie. The U.S. military, that is their primary go-to strategy, is the lie.
Exactly.
And since such a high percentage of police come out of the military, that's their go-to strategy. And the problem with them lying, of course, is there are tens of thousands of people in
with
U.S.
video cameras today
that are there because the police set them up in line. Yeah.
Well, here's the other thing. The other thing I want to say, and it is a color issue, but just like it was a black cop that shot the black guy over here in North Carolina, who apparently they weren't even looking for. They picked a fight with this guy, so they were in the wrong. He was in the. Yeah. Nobody should ever. I want to tell this to all our listeners. When a cop, smart-ass cop or not, pulls you over and tells you to get out of your car, do not have a gun in your hand. White, black, and different. They will shoot you on the spot. I promise you. Every time. And I just want to point out there is a color issue, and it's called there's blue, and then there's you. And there's nothing in between.
Yeah.
That's it. There's blue, and there's you.
But it's like the military. It's them and the rest of us, and we're supposed to pay homage to them. And no, not going to do that. And you've got the Kaepernicker and people that are taking a knee for the national anthem. Now, I don't take a knee for anybody. I'm not taking a knee for anybody under any circumstance. I'm not taking a knee for the national anthem. I'm just won't be in the arena.
Well, he's just a guy doing everything for the wrong reason, and
correct,
exactly.
Yeah.
Why take a knee? I mean, what are we to pay homage to Rome? That's a Roman flag, kids. That's Roman.
Yeah, but
I've looked at it. It's
flat
out
thing about the whole thing is people have a conniption fit that he won't stand at attention for the national anthem. My only issue with him is he's doing it because of he thinks it's racial discrimination in America, and the Department of Justice numbers are published online. They've been published for decades. And they say that if a black is murdered, 90% of the time when that black is murdered, they're killed by a fellow black. And if a white and a black person are involved in a homicide, the black is the perpetrator 80% of the time, and the white is the victim. Makes the white the victim 80% of the time. So there is a serious murder issue in the black community. And it's the opposite of what these people are protesting. And, of course, Black Lives Matter found the perfect organization for them to partner with. That's the collegiate academic boycott Israel. The Palestinians have...
Oh, yeah, they were out there with Palestinian flags. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's not just that. One of their chief spokesmen that came out was some Islamic representative. And who led the whole thing? A bunch of whores. They're called clerics. Preachers. If you want to go out, we're called to be set apart. Not part of a collective anything.
Correct.
So if you want to be part of a collective and then say God somehow blesses you, knows you, loves you, whatever, I can tell you universally, 100% of the time, you will be wrong. You're nobody in reality. You're just a nobody. You're a nobody.
The reason that this is important is that if you watch people's reaction to it, the dominant reaction is born out of ignorance or is irrational. The people are unable to realize why Black Lives Matter is a complete farce, upside down. They don't realize
it is a communist organization, by the way.
Yeah.
It is communist. It is true.
And by the way, I don't even care if it's capitalist.
But it is. It just happens to be.
I do not care. So I do care that it partnered aggressively with the anti-Israeli morons of the Islamic persuasion. That bothers me a lot. Their economic philosophy, what was American capitalism now is more socialistic than is the Chinese economic system in a communist country.
So, absolutely. We're more red than Red China. Absolutely.
Yeah, so those labels don't mean much to me anymore because of what we have become. But this is the part that I just wanted to say, because it's Yahowah was very clear about the fact that the United States is his least favorite country.
That's right.
It was Rome, and the organization he hates the most is the Roman Catholic Church. He's made that irrefutably clear, that Imperial Rome was the most vicious, most disgusting empire in human history, and what grew out of it, which is the Roman Catholic Church, is the organization that he hates the most. But if you were to take one country today, based upon what Yahweh says through Yahshua, it's the United States that God despises. And it is easy to see how we are going to crumble. It's my opinion, based upon what I've seen and what I've read, that this is the last president that the United States will elect. And when you consider the two slime balls that are running for the U.S. presidency, it really serves us right. And then to see these continued Muslim bombings without anybody dealing with the fact that it's Islam, and the response being to inundate the society with the National Guard and tens of thousands of police, and to militarize the police, and that the solution to all of this is to increase policing and therefore to curtail liberties, we are going to very quickly slip into a draconian society that only votes for the pretense of it, but your vote absolutely will not matter. This will be the last.
You're already at that point, in my opinion. You're already at that point.
Yeah. Now, one of the things most people don't know is that because of the Electoral College, your vote only matters in about 5 or 6 states. The Republican candidate has to win all of the swing states because of the Electoral College and the fact that the states like California, it's winner take all. So the only states where, yes, and New York, and Massachusetts, and Washington State, and Oregon. There's a number of states that are, so that the Democrats have all but 15% of the votes that they require on the Electoral College, because it's winner take all, it's not popular vote in those states. And so there are, and there are states that if you're a Democrat, your vote doesn't matter because they're going to vote for the Republican candidate. There's only about 6 swing states. The Republican candidate has to win all of those. If you're not in one of those 6 swing states, your vote does not matter. There's no reason for you to vote at all. Your state is not in play. And so for the presidential election, because of the Electoral College, unless you live in one of those 6 states, you're wasting your time to vote. And on congressional seats, because the districts have been so jury-rigged, that on a congressional seat, only 15% of those elections are determined by the people as opposed to the party. The party chooses who to run, and the districts have been jury-rigged so that the other party is not in contention in 85% of the seats. So
and of course this is no accident.
Democracy is a waste. You're absolutely deluding yourself.
You know, when I was on the executive committee, and I'm sure you saw this kind of thing, well, you know, Jacksonville, Florida is not, a major city, but it is a city, and there was about 20 of us on the executive committee, and when we would break up into groups and say, okay, now who do we want to support? Basically, what would happen? There'd be about 5 tables, and they'd be kind of whining and dining us, and some guy with shiny shoes and silver hair would walk in from Washington and tell us what we were going to do. That was the end of it, if you want to know the truth. I mean, that's the real truth. You could argue if you wanted, but it would get you absolutely nothing and get you absolutely nowhere. That is how it's done in every major city in the country, I promise you. That's
and I will tell you that 100% of who Washington wants, that would be the higher-ups in the party, the elite in the party, is who has paid them the most significant bribes.
And today they're all international globalists. All of them.
So now,
all of them.
For example, today Obama vetoed the 9/11 bill against Saudi Arabia that would have given private citizens the right to sue Saudi Arabia for their complicity in 9/11. And he vetoed it. And, it's just like his predecessor not publishing the 9/11 report, leaving out every reference to Saudi Arabia, And then immediately when he leaves the office, he got a $25 million payment for a speech that he allegedly made in Saudi Arabia. How much do you think the Sauds are paying Barack Obama to preclude him from signing that, sending it back as a veto?
I would guess 100 million, 50 million, something like that.
Yeah, certainly north of 25 million. That's the going rate.
I can tell you this, when the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation openly opposed Haitians, this is how they support poor black people worldwide. They openly opposed a minimum wage increase from $3 a day to $5 a day in Haiti after the earthquake. And then the Clintons backed the only cell phone representative down there. And finally, this guy sold his cell phone business or electronic business, I forget the ins and outs of it, but for $165 million, at which time Bill was flown over to Ireland, because the guy owned the company was from Ireland, and he gave a $25 million speech.
Yeah.
Now, this is a leader. This is a leader.
It went into his foundation.
Well, of course. I did one little thing. I just want to read this before we get started, because you started it out with the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think you guys might enjoy this. Multiple felon Keith Lamont Scott had just finished baking cupcakes, I'm pretending to be a journalist here, for his 7 children before arriving at the bus stop to pick up his son. Keith was early, so he decided to read his copy of Tolstoy's War and Peace, when a gang of police targeting black people ripped him out of his car and shot him to death. So goes the story. Anyway, we have apparently been deprived of yet another candidate for Father of the Year, and the city of Charlotte laments this loss because the lives of multiple violent felons matter. But private property rights sure as hell don't. There you go. That's what I've got to say about that subject.
Now, I will say that from what I've heard on the one video that was released, the cell phone video of the woman, is that she was there filming this when the police came up to the car. And she told the police, she said, don't shoot. My husband has a brain injury. And he had been in an accident, he had a brain injury. Don't shoot. He's going to be slow, but don't shoot. And they shot anyway, and of course they killed him.
I'm not siding with the police. I'm just pointing something out.
Black Lives Matter can't find an actual person. And after all of these shootings, you would think that other than Tamir Rice, who they for some reason neglect, they can't find somebody to rally around.
Well, they neglect the guy down in Texas.
Look at the kid that's down there in Florida that was stalking and then harassing and fighting the Mexican guy that started this whole thing. And turns out that kid was an absolute horrible kid. And then the president wore the hoodie and all that sort of thing to try to lionize him. And he was a guy that ran
around breaking into the homes of others and stealing jewelry and so forth. That's who he was. And my heart goes out for people who are pulled out of their cars on freeways and beaten up because they're from a different race. Or my heart goes out for the people who have poured their work and their time into a business and had it destroyed by a bunch of thugs. People that
to the little girls in Iraq and Syria that fundamentalist Muslims have kidnapped from their homes. They had to watch the fundamentalist Muslims murder their brothers and murder their fathers, and then take them and gang rape them, and then throw them on a stage while reading from the Quran, naked, and auction them off to other thugs where they're enslaved and gang raped. And that which is going on around the world, my heart goes out for them. My heart would go out for all of the little Muslim girls. Now there's 500,000, according to the CDC now in America, whose mothers sexually mutilate them. but I said would go out to them because it's very hard for me to feel empathy for Muslims, because those Muslims who are sexually mutilated will turn around and sexually mutilate their daughters. So it's difficult to feel empathy for someone that perpetuates that cycle.
Yeah, it's like feeling sorry for a pedophile because he was a victim.
Right.
One thing I will point out, and you know, I really want to point this out to you and also to the other people. You know, Yada was watching this stuff, and of course Yalda's Iranian, and she grew up in, you know, a Muslim environment. Now, of course, it was really a Western environment. Her family was robbed by the Muslims after they were considered feudal lords. Okay, so they had a lot of their wealth taken. But she says, how can anybody call this a religion? You know, they claim to be religious when they're out hurting people. See, their concept, you understand that their concept, they don't read the Quran. They just think everybody should love everybody, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's why so many people have been convinced that the Islamic terrorists can't be fundamentalist religious types, because there would be no reason they would be out creating all these.
They're totally fundamentalist religious types. They believe it.
What they don't understand is that Muhammad was a pedophile. Muhammad was a rapist. Muhammad was a thief. Muhammad was a mass murderer. Muhammad was a terrorist. So they don't understand that the religion itself was born out of terror. It's the same reason people don't understand the imperial Roman edicts and caste system and the like, and the pagan religion and abuse of Rome that bled into Roman Catholicism. They don't understand it, so they therefore discount it. So they can't comprehend how it could be so evil.
You know, but see, that's where we're at, aren't we? We're at this place. We understand that Yahweh disparages any type of religious behavior. Does he not?
Right.
I mean, he tells us not to imitate any part of it.
Right.
Now, we realize that, we recognize that there are people that will start off down the path and they want to keep one foot in Christianity, the other in Rabbinic Judaism. These are called Messianics, correct? And then if you continue down the path, what you end up doing is the same thing you did, Craig, the same thing I did, which is you walk away from both. You walk away from both because you realize.
Evidence is really clear. Evidence and reason leads you away from politics. It leads you away from patriotism, militarism, and all religion.
And besides government,
there is not a rational religion. There's no worthy political party. There's no worthy military. Militaries do not fight for people's freedom. They do exactly the opposite. They impose the government's will.
Could you be elected in the United States if you stood up and told the truth?
Zero chance. You wouldn't even have
you wouldn't get 1% of the vote. You couldn't get 1% of the vote. You couldn't even get 1% of the vote.
No,
and that's the end of the political answer for the U.S.
You couldn't even be nominated to run by the libertarians.
Well, you know, when you call a guy a libertarian that believes in forced immunizations, and he also, I saw the thing where Gary Judd, somebody said illegal aliens, and his face contorted, and he went nuts. You say undocumented worker. You understand that? You know, and so he's also the thought police. This is what a libertarian is today, the thought police. It's absolutely bizarre. I was just like, oh, God, this guy. I mean, that's an act. That's not even libertarianism from an actual political standpoint. It was just so pathetic, you know. But anyway, this is the state of affairs we're in. So, you know.
Yeah. Bad and worse. Bad and worse. And it's disintegrating rapidly. This question could be asked of any city, but well, no, I guess there's really only one city this could be set up, because it begins positively, and I don't think there is a city that would have this initial legacy. It says, how is a city, and Kiryah is the word for city. It's not the typical word for city, is the typical word for city in Hebrew. This is
now what passage are we on? I'm sorry.
1.1. Yeshaya 1:21. And so he says, how has a city, Kirya, it's from Kara, which means to meet, to reveal the presence of, and to encounter someone, and the someone is obviously Yah. So how is the city to meet Yahweh, for Yahweh to reveal himself, and for us to encounter Yahweh, once filled with enduring truth, Aman. Now this is the word that has been corrupted to Amen, so that it could pay allegiance to the Egyptian god. And for the most part, for most of their history, the Egyptian god was Amen. And then there were pharaohs that preferred Ra. Amen was the sun god, Ra was the sun god. It's just that ultimately they blended, they synchronized the two religions into one, and it became Amen Ra. But Amen is the chief solar deity of the Egyptians. He's the same as Bel and Babylon. The same as Jupiter and Rome. The same as Zeus in Greece. The same as Mithra and among the Roman legions. But this word is not Amen. It is Aman, and it is a word. It is not a name. It is not a title. And because it's not a word, or a name, or a title, it has to be translated from one language to another. It should never have its sound transliterated to say, and to say Amen. It's like translating the Hebrew or the Greek word for messenger, which is agelos, as angel. No, that's
this is another lovely example of why it's fraudulent. It's not only not at the end of a declarative statement of some kind, giving some kind of phony praise, but in addition to that, it's in the middle of a sentence, and it's never set apart as in capitalized, even though I realize none of them are. But I'm saying if you were to write this enduring truth, or that truth which is verifiable, I understand what it means. Depending on the situation, I think enduring truth is probably the best here. But I have to tell you, that's just another proof that the Amen was added, and it's the Egyptian sun god. That's just another proof of it. Because they don't transliterate, as an example, Asher. They don't say Asher.
No, they don't. Yeah, they don't transliterate Henna. They don't transliterate Haya. I mean,
don't transliterate anything.
They don't translate Dabar for word. They don't translate Eretz for land. And these are, it's just a standard word, and Aman is like many Hebrew words, where the noun and the verb form are written exactly the same. And it's Aman, and it means enduring truth. It means established, trustworthy, verifiable, confirming. So the truth was confirmed. It is verifiable. It is trustworthy. It is reliable. And the city that Yah revealed himself. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things I found in that word also was not subject to change or revision. And when you're applying that to the city called Jerusalem, then there is absolutely no way that you could have any other restoration or any other salvation come from a city that, if it doesn't change, it don't change.
Right. Yeah, so how did Rabbinic Judaism emerge in 900 years later in that city? How did Christianity arrive 800 years later in this city? How did Islam derive its identity from this city? If, in fact, Amman means this city was a place where truth cannot change.
Right. So,
yes.
Well, I mean, that's a good point, that which only goes to prove anytime somebody's talking about one of the Abrahamic religions, it's a non sequitur. I mean, that's it.
Correct.
There's no way around it.
Correct. So, how is a city once filled, Malay, complete, wholly abundant, and fully satisfying with enduring truth, that which is established and trustworthy, never changing, nurturing, and dependable, become like Haya Ka, coming to exist as Behor. Behor. Now, this ought to prove something. You know, Larry, you and I are on the far extreme of this, but I think
I'm gonna stay extreme, by the way.
Okay, on food. And every time that Yahowah mentions food, he is not talking about food. He is talking about that which you consume, which is from his testimony, which is nourishing and edifying. Or if you devour what man says, it's going to make you sick and die. And that every time he talks about food, that's what he's talking about. You know, for example, that you ought not eat the catfish because it's a bottom dwelling.
Bottom feeder.
Bottom feeder, sucking up refuge. The clams, for example, and mussels and that sort of thing are filters to clean the rubbish out of the sea. So those are metaphors for you ought not do that kind of stuff. The pig, will wallow in its own refuge. It will eat any kind of garbage, and so it was a metaphor for don't eat garbage. Don't consume that which feeds on garbage. And so I bring that up because when Yahowah speaks of a whore, he is not talking about the world's oldest profession.
No, he's not.
He's not saying that the city. He's not saying that the city of Jerusalem was prostituting itself. The city doesn't have.
He is, but he meant it in a very metaphorical sense. He's saying it for sure. Yeah.
Right. You can't be any more metaphorical. And every time Yahowah talks about harlots and whores, he's talking about those peddling politics and religion. They're making false promises. They're trying to entice people. They're covered in makeup. They're pretending, feigning love, while exchanging this act for money.
By the way, Israel Hillel just emailed me here, and he said, or messaged me. He said, one is not nourished by bread alone, but by the very words that come out of Yah's mouth. How appropriate is that?
Yeah, how appropriate is that?
That's a good point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, how has it become like a whore? The honest, fair, accurate, upright, vindicating path to righteousness, and the righteous means to justly resolve disputes. Sadak mishpat is a marvelous juxtaposition of those two words, where mishpat is the first four moed mikre, provide the just means for Yahowah to resolve the disputes, to justly exonerate us, and it's juxtaposed to sadak, which makes us upright, vindicates us through these just means to resolve disputes. So sadak mishpat had once dwelled in her, even through the darkest hours. But now, they're murderers. Boy, you look at that, you want to apply that to the first part, you can't, there's no other city that was once good that has become bad. But there are a lot of places that you could say, they're now full of murderers. How about
absolutely. Yeah. Except you could never say Chicago was good.
Not the soul murder, not the one that murders the most souls. I mean, the religion is the soul killer.
Yeah, if you're talking about the most souls being killed, that would be the religion that claims. Christianity would be the worst.
Pauline religions.
Yeah, the Pauline religion would be the worst. Then, this is interesting because of all of the religious types that want to donations. They live off donations. Your money and that which you yearn for have become impure and worthless dross. Your alcoholic drinks are diluted in the sea. So, you think that God wants money if he's calling it impure and worthless?
No.
We talked a little bit about money being impure and worthless. The Romans, 400, 500 years, the Romans didn't even exist at the time this was written. But 400 or 500 years after this was written, the Romans, actually 700 years after this was written, the Romans began they were the first to inflate their currency. to devalue it by changing the purity of the silver and then shaving off the weight of silver in their coinage, so that a Roman coin became worth less and less over time. Same value printed on the face of it, but it was less silver and less pure silver. And so they did it, of course, because the politicians like Nero and Claudius and others wanted to bribe the people with all sorts of civic projects, but they didn't have the money to spend on them, so they devalued the currency to do this. But can you imagine a currency worth less than the fiat money that America runs on?
No, I can't. As you pointed out, they don't even print it anymore. I mean, it's not even worth paper and ink anymore. It's on a computer screen.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a blip.
It's binary bits on a computer.
Correct.
That's pretty worthless,
and all based on debt. But the idea that God wants your money, when He's saying that your money is impure and worthless, I really don't think He wants it, needs it.
I don't think he needs us to give 10% every week to the church.
No.
Well, I liked your point today where you said, if he's calling it like a cow patty, why would he want a quarter of it or 10% of it?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
To JB's 10%.
Yeah.
To JB's 10%.
It smells too nice up here in heaven. I really would love the stench of cow patties.
Yeah.
Your alcoholic drinks are diluted in the sea. We talked about this briefly this afternoon, so we'll go over it quickly. But if without alcohol, you couldn't live in a city like Jerusalem. It would have been impossible because they didn't know at the time that you could boil water to purify it. The only way that you could make water safe to drink was to brew beer or wine. And so if you were to dilute your beer and wine with water, then you're adding the pathogens back in, and your water is going to kill you. If you're diluting your alcoholic drinks with the sea, and the sea is a symbol of goyim, of Gentile religions, then you have the symbolism of those Gentile religions in your beverage that was supposed to be safe, no longer safe. Again, food, looking at it from a symbolic point of view. And the other is that alcohol is the thing that impairs our judgment. And so if you not only drink alcohol, which impairs your judgment, but dilute it with water that is not the result of being brewed, then you're going to die from two different ways. Your judgment's impaired, and you're going to have all the pathogens as a result, because you won't know how to keep away from them. All right, then that takes us to this is the statement that describes Charlotte and St. Louis and so many of the other cities that are in riot mode and have been over the last year or so. Your political and religious officials, SAR, your leaders, high-ranking officers, your government rulers and wardens, your nobility and overseers, your most influential merchants, and your contentious adversarial lords. They're defiant and obstinate in their rebellion. And they are closely associated with, akin to, kidnappers, slave traders, and thieves. Every one of them loves a bribe.
Wait, again, everyone?
Payoffs and rewards. It says every poll. Every one of them, all of them, all means all, that's all means. Chases after payoffs and rewards. I've said many times that there isn't a single politician in America that's deserving of your vote or support. God says they all chase after rewards and payoffs. All means all, that's all means. There is not a single decent person, moral, covenant member that's engaged in politics. And the reason that that's the case, the reason there isn't a single decent, moral, just politician who's a covenant member is you can't be involved with the government and be part of the covenant. So if you're part of the government, you're running for political office, part of the government, you cannot be a covenant member. If you're part of the military, you can't be a covenant member.
No.
You know, if you are engaged as a religious leader, you cannot be part of the covenant. And if you're not part of the covenant, your mindset is inappropriate. And so God's saying that everybody that runs for political office, everyone that positions himself as a religious official, is defiant and obstinate in their rebellion. They're closely associated with kidnappers, slave traders, and thieves, and every one of them chases after payoffs and rewards. They love a bribe. All of them. That's a blanket statement. That's God doing what man doesn't want to do anymore. That's when you're categorizing everybody the same, and that people just have a conniption fit when you do that today. You can't, paint everybody with the same brush.
Profiling is bad.
Yahweh just
profiling that.
He just profiled him for
everybody
us,
in politics, every religious leader, every political leader is corrupt.
Scum.
Well, the more you militarize the police, they become the same as the army, and they should all be within the same swipe too.
Yep.
Yeah, can I digress here just a second? You were talking about the thieves, and obviously you've written about this, but I want to point this out in Malachi. JB, you brought up their 10%. I have actually heard this passage twisted to mean people should pay 10%. Here's what it says very quickly. Does God exploit and rob man? But indeed, you all exploit and rob according to me. But you ask, in what way do we exploit you by force and deception? Yahweh answers the tithe and the offering. Your perspectives is based upon appearances, but you actually extort all of his people. And what does he say then? Return with all of the tithe. He's not talking to a congregation. He's talking to the clerics who stole the money.
Mm-hmm.
So when they try to twist this into saying, well, this right here says you're supposed to be laying out a percentage, and they get into Malachi. Malachi is telling them, you give back what you've stolen. That's
right.
He's talking to the clerics.
You're required
He's not talking about anybody in the field.
And you took it for personal reasons. You were seeking a bribe, a reward. You're paying yourself out of it. No, return it. And that's what he says, return it. Return it back to the people who gave it.
Yeah, to the storehouse that no longer exists. So you can't make a tithe. Anybody paying a tithe today is a buffoon, and you're being robbed. That's what
I had a reason as I was in the 11th chapter of Observations to talk about how there's one particular passage where Yahweh was talking to Yishak, and he's telling Yishak that he is going to honor all the promises of the covenant that he had made to his father Abraham, and he gives the reasons, and the reasons are because Abraham listened to what he had to say, and that he closely examined and carefully considered. He shamar, he observed, and then he goes through the list, and the list are the prescriptions that Yahweh cut into stone to cut us into the relationship, the tukah, the mitzvot, the means to justly resolve disputes, and of course at the end is the Torah. And so I was going over, and it had here Shama, and every English Bible translated Shama, obey. And then Shamar, and they translated it keep, as in keep in compliance with, submit to. And then they translated Torah, which means teaching. They translated it as, I can't say translated, they changed it to law. And so I had a reason to write this. Listen, those who think that shamar means to keep in the sense of complying with, as opposed to observe, should know that most of what the Torah says you cannot do. You can't make a donation of wool or wood to Yahweh's storehouse. You can't do anything that was prescribed for the temple. You cannot go out and kill somebody because they picked up sticks on the Shabbat. You know, the test for a virgin, where the father and mother are supposed to bring evidence of her virginity to the elders, you ain't going to do that. You know, you could go through and you could list hundreds upon hundreds of things that are listed in the Torah that you just cannot do today. Try to go ahead and bring 4 days before Passover a live lamb into your home to live with your family, and then slit its throat before your family and see what happens to you. Or try to butcher all the animals needed for Shabbat.
Yeah, exactly. What is 7 cows and whatever else? I mean, you're marching them out there, aren't you? Sure.
So there are huge swaths of the Torah that cannot be obeyed, cannot be kept. But, you know, there's no part of the Torah that cannot be observed, and by observing it, by closely examining, carefully considering it, understood.
And you could consider, as an example, you wouldn't want to consume the words of law, keep, and obey. And instead, because that would be like eating the pork, the whole damn ham, really. And so what you would want to do is look at Yahweh's nature and what it is he's actually saying. You know, that might be a good example there, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So here is God saying they're all interested in a bribe. And then there's 2 parts of this that follow. One is pretty straightforward. They do not bring justice to. They do not plead on behalf of. They do not adjudicate by promoting informed, reasonable, and rational conclusions which encourage good judgment and lead to the vindication of the fatherless child, of the Yatzon, which is the orphan child who is searching without sufficient resources. So God wants us and to bring justice to. This is a person who is searching, who does not know Yahweh, but is open and wants to know him, willing to invest the time to know, just doesn't have the resources. And God wants us to plead on their behalf, to promote an informed, reasonable, and rational case on their behalf. You know, this has nothing to do. There's no part of Shaphat, the verb here, and it was negated. There's no part of Shaphat that says, you know, open an orphanage. There's no part of Shabbat that says create the No Child Left Behind program. No.
Well, I mean, they did want to make it sound like it was a social. He was making some kind of a social statement. And by the way, religious organization after religious organization after religious organization hides behind what? The feeding of orphans and the taking care of widows. And isn't that true? Isn't that what they do? That's how they justify theft all the time.
Yeah. So they do not bring justice to the fatherless child. And then this next one is rib. And quarreling with the congregation of the dumb, bound, and forsaken is not pursued by them in the sun. Dawn on them.
That's the religious congregation.
Yeah, and of course, you know, there's, well, almana can mean widow. Rib cannot, there is no aspect of rib that is anything different than showing hostility towards. Rib is open and willful opposition, filing a complaint against, pleading in opposition, taunting, insulting, mocking, ridiculing. And so once you know the definition of rib, that means to quarrel with, to mock, to ridicule, to taunt, to show hostility to. And there's no way to change that. I mean, that's all rib means. And now,
then you can't go to widow, or Yahweh would be telling you to go make fun of and poke fun of and beat up on widows.
Right.
Yeah,
sure.
You can't translate almana as widow with rib as the thing that Yahweh wants you to do. And second of all, there's no way to change rib. And third of all, this idea that being quarrelsome, taunting, mocking, insulting, that the idea that that is a bad thing to do, God is refuting that. He's saying, no, I want you to mock. I want you to quarrel. I want you to taunt. And if you look at Yosef's reaction to the religious establishment, I mean, read Matanya 23. I mean, he is taunting, ridiculing, mocking the religious, insulting the religious establishment, showing hostility and willful opposition to them.
You mean he was following his own instructions?
He was. So
Whoa.
quarrel with, and then, almanah means the silent and silenced, who are unable to speak. Those who have joined and are now bound to a religion. A widow whose spouse has died, and by extension is in a state of abandonment, and the prolonged feminine of alam, which means the bereaved worshiping congregation of silent and dumb who are bound. And the English word for religion is based on the Latin legare, which means to join and to bind. He's speaking of the congregation of religious who have been dumbed down and are now forsaken. And God wants you to quarrel with them.
No, I just thought it's also what Paul told them. Their God had died, their father had died, so he gave them a new one. It's that cycle of God dies and then a new one comes up.
All right. That's right. Yeah. The old God is replaced by a new kind.
The new one, yeah.
Yeah. I've come to know Yahweh pretty well. I think when it comes to being kind to those who listen to what he has to say, the deal he cut with me, I'm going to tell you, it's more than generous. I can't imagine God being any kinder than he has been to me.
Well, and to call the Christian God kind is to be stupid. The Christian God says, "Love me or burn in hell for all eternity." Is that kind?
Well, that's true. It's not so kind. Yeah, it's not so kind. Yep. Therefore, this is the prophetic announcement of the upright one, of Yahweh, of the spiritual implements, the mighty one of Yisrael. Now, that's a pretty interesting opening declarative statement there. So, Yahshua saying, hey, I'm not saying this. This is not coming from me. I'm reporting what the only person and individual in the universe that has this title. So what comes next is from God. If you've got a problem with it, your problem is with God.
Talk to the man upstairs.
Right, talk to the man upstairs. Therefore, Lockett, assuredly as a result, truly on behalf of the upright, and to affirm their proper approach, this is the prophetic announcement, Nahum, the emphatic proclamation on the authority of, and it's Ha-Edom, the upright one, the upright pillar of the tabernacle, of Yahweh, of the spiritual implements. And the Sabbath is written because the only way that Yahweh can really interact with us is through his implements. Yahweh cannot, as a seven-dimensional being, enter our three-dimensional construct. And so he interacts with us through his spiritual implements, Sabbath. And so this is Yahweh of the spiritual implements, of the mighty one, the Almighty of Yisrael, of individuals who engage and endure with God. And this is not the mighty one of Babylon. This is not the mighty one of Rome. This is not the mighty one of Mitzrayim, Egypt. The mighty one of Yisrael, individuals who engage and endure with God. It begins with woe. Alas. This is a warning, signaling the very great anguish. I will be relieved of my adversaries, and I will take vengeance on my enemies. So when in the Greek New Testament, when the line, judge not lest you be judged, and love your enemies as yourself is presented in that unreliable Greek text. What do you think the odds are that Yosha actually said anything like that?
Zero. Not a zero. Didn't say it. I mean, they just made it up. They made it up.
Right. Right.
Don't you think? And I've always thought that a lot of that was due to the fact that the clergy didn't want to be judged for all the horrible things that they were doing to others. That's my opinion, and they didn't want any judgment to come down on them, because they sure as hell didn't care if other people were judged.
Right.
I mean, I think
they didn't want anybody thinking. I could play with the Greek and say that it's a credo, and credo means separated. So if you were translating it into English, do not separate lest you be separated, and therefore you have a legitimate statement from Yosha but Yosha didn't speak Hebrew. And the text of the Christian
didn't
is
speak
so
Greek.
unreliable. He didn't speak Greek. He spoke Hebrew. And the text of the Christian New Testament is so unreliable, it isn't worth going through those that effort. So I would just won't.
No, I remember there was a time you did. There was a time you actually did that. But you know, the truth, and I remember reading that. What the law? First of all, it's in a whole passage where Yahusha is talking about being judgmental about everything to make sure it's in conjunction with the Torah. And then in the end, he says, "Judge not, lest you be judged." I mean, that boy, wow, my whole brain just fell out right there. Which is what you wrote is if he said it, what he said is, "Don't lead others away or separate others out, or you'll find yourself separated."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, the Torah we can rely on, and the Torah says, therefore, this is the prophetic announcement of the upright one, of Yahweh, of the spiritual implement, the Almighty of Yisrael. Woe, I will be relieved of my adversaries, and I will take vengeance on my enemies. So if you're adversarial to Yahweh, which everyone who is religious is, there isn't a single religious person on this planet that is that knows Yahweh and that uses His name, that loves His name, that reveres His Torah, that promotes His Torah. Not a single religious person on the planet. And God is saying, those people are my adversaries. I'll be relieved of them. There will be no... And He's already gone and told you that these people that are scumbags, just the previous statement, the scumbags are religious and political leaders. He's already told you who the scumbags is, and He says, I'm going to be relieved of them. I will not only find a measure of relief and be disassociated from them, I'm going to avenge myself against these adversaries, my enemies, my foes. And I will take vengeance on. I will seek justice, therefore punish, inflicting retribution on my enemies. You know, you're going to be a priest, a bishop, a cardinal, or a pope in the Roman Catholic Church. You're going to face God's vengeance. You know, if you're going to be an imam in Islam, you're going to face God's vengeance. If you're a Muslim and you're out there terrorizing Jews, matter of fact, if you're just raping little girls, you know, it's God's creation. Doesn't like that. It's going to take vengeance. And so it's the kind of thing I've said so many times. Our problem isn't that we hate. It's that we don't hate enough and we don't know what to hate.
That was a profound statement. It was correct. It was absolutely correct. I completely agree with that. I think
appropriate if directed properly.
That was one of the things that led me to Yahweh, by the way. Just saying, well, you know, there is a need for hatred, and realizing around religious people that you couldn't say that. I said there's something wrong with
who's
them.
the consequence here? Who has God talked about here? He's talking about religious and political leaders who are out
These
for
are the
pride,
people that advance
and then
these
he's
ideas.
transitioned to say, I hate them, and I'm going to take vengeance on them. I'm going to seek retribution against them. So
Can I tell you one other thing I read that I thought was cool? My enemies, and you look up, I was looking up the tent pole. In the history of the tent pole, ancient times, it was a pointed stick, and so they could obviously get it into the ground, but it was also taken apart, used as a spear to defend the family. So you've got both sides of Yahweh, the upright pole. He's, he'll take his vengeance. He'll kill your enemy, and kill the enemies of his family.
That's right.
So this is not the lovey little Jesus that everybody wants.
No, God.
The baby Jesus.
Yeah. You know, they say, you know, the God of the Old Testament is hateful and vengeful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
the only way to be just,
the only way to be just, the only way to be moral. If you do not hate Islam, then you're immoral. You're ignorant, irrational, immoral, because the religion is promoting the rape, kidnap, and abuse of little girls, mutilation of little girls, and 99% of the world's terrorist acts. If you don't hate the motivation for those things, then you're immoral. It's not complicated. There are things to hate. You should hate religions that inspire terror. You should hate religions that inspire pedophilia. You should hate religions that inspire kidnapping.
I think you should hate religions that advance the idea that people that go out and rape, little boys and girls and murder them should be forgiven. I think you should hate them too. They're part of the problem.
The kid roof that went into the African American church and killed those people. Now there's a case. He was not a Muslim. He was just a neo-Nazi type, and you ought to hate him too. And all the people said, "Oh no, we ought not turn to hate. We ought to try to embrace everyone." And I'm going to forgive him. Why would you forgive him?
I wouldn't. The only thing, they are exceptional. I've actually debated these people. You want to talk about people? I'll tell you who they hate at the very top of their list, without a doubt, is the Jews. That's who they hate the most. Blacks are second. Whites are who have any affiliation with either are just as dead, but they're third. And then they hate everything else until they get down to this Church of the White Man or whatever the hell it is. It's always got some name like that. And it's the most Hitler is their God, basically.
Right.
I mean, he's their God. I mean, they quote him all the time. It's been a lot of years since I debated these people, but they're really sick. Yeah, he was part Jewish, I know.
Hitler was Jewish. Yeah,
I know.
It's just amazing.
They're astounding idiots. I had one of them tell me he was the most brilliant man that ever lived, and I said, so a guy that gets 60 million people killed and his own country destroyed and divided is brilliant? I said, that's your idea of brilliance. Wow.
Yeah. Or like Rabbi Akiva, the founder of Rabbinic Judaism, and he brought on the scourge, really, of the diaspora.
Of Rome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, remind people, too, that...
Rome.
I was going to say,
I don't want to taunt my government. I don't like my government, but I will never ask anyone to band together for an armed insurrection against the government. That is a bad idea for everyone.
You'd get them
killed. It's a bad idea for everybody. That's
they
what
would all get
Akiva
slaughtered.
did. Akiva wanted to be singularly empowered, and so he created a false messiah in 133 CE and called for an armed insurrection against Rome. Now, was Rome scummy? Yeah. Was Rome deserving of being bludgeoned? Absolutely. But that was not the right way to respond. Had Akiva said, "Why don't we return to the Torah? Why don't we get rid of all of the Gentile religious artifacts? Why don't we discard our religion and engage in the covenant relationship?" Rome would have been no more.
I want to point something out. I had a conversation with a fellow that was a preacher for 24 years. His name is Russ Baskin. I'm going to use his name because I'm sure he's proud of this fact. He, for 2 years, read my notes and read Yada Yahweh and ITG. Could find nothing wrong with it. And some months ago, him and his wife flew in, walked away from Christianity and into the covenant. And he actually, we had a conversation a couple weeks ago on the phone. He was going out to debate the people he had been preaching to for, 25 years. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
That's strong, man. Yeah. Well, he's obviously even somebody who's participated, full bore in the religious program can wake up and walk away. And that was astounding to me.
Yeah, I participated full bore in American politics and patriotism and in religion. And I was an ordained ruling elder in the Presbyterian Church. I was a trained evangelist. And while I'm embarrassed by that, I'm also grateful for it. It's kind of like Moshe. I think Moshe was disgusted by what he did when he was in Egypt. But it served him well. Knowing the enemy, I was, every day that I wrote Prophet of Doom, I realized that I'm wallowing in the dirtiest, most repulsive sewer ever created by man by analyzing and reporting on the Quran and Hadith. But I'm so glad I did it. There is an advantage of coming to know your enemy and then exposing and quarreling with that enemy. There's a huge advantage in that. And so what I'm embarrassed by, it, I think, helped prepare me to do this. I don't think I could have written Questioning Paul had I not been a Christian.
Yeah, you wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have known even what he said. And I mean,
right?
Yeah, obviously you were very well versed in Paul. But I do believe that you even said at one point when you realized Paul was a fraud, it practically you wanted to cry.
I did.
You know,
because I was so embarrassed that I'd been misled for so long, and I was so sad for so many people that had been misled by Christianity. Because and the thing that really bothered me the most was how obvious it was that he was a fraud. It's so blatantly obvious. It's so absolutely irrefutable that he was a fraud and a con man that was demon-possessed. It is so in your face that I was horrified that the one skill I thought I had, which was to be rational, that I'd been played for
by the way, that was James Baskin. There's two Baskins that just came in. I meant James Baskin, but Russ just recently came in too. And they came in because of Lisa Baskin, who helped establish the church and then debated with this group for a long time, and then walked away, and then there are people now walking away, and that was because of Lisa Baskin, but it was James Baskin I meant. But Russ also has come over, but it's astounding the work that Lisa Baskin.
Witnessing, and I think it was Roy that noticed this not too long ago, is that we are witnessing a fairly substantial uptick in the number of people who are coming to know Yahweh and who the truth is leading away from religion and politics to the covenant. And you know, it used to be that we would find one person every 2 or 3 months would come to a knowledge of the truth, and now it's happening weekly. So there is a real significant revival in terms of just Yahweh's testimony reaching people, people willing to be open to it. Now that still doesn't. It's still less than 1 in 100, and it's probably that hears this that responds, and it's less than 1 in 1 million worldwide. But the covenant.
Well, James Ball just contacted me and wanted to call into the show when he's heard us talking here. It might be good to have him on.
Sure. JB can look for him if he's there. So I will turn my hand, desiring to remove your impurities, in the manner of natural laundry chemicals which clean, your repulsive rubbish and your worthless divisions, all of which I will elect to remove. Now, here's one of the things where shub, which means to turn, and yad means hand. Ani is the first person, so it's mine. So, wa shub yad ani is so I will turn my hand. Now, God was just saying that he was going to seek vengeance and punish the people who were adversarial, which was the religious and political types. So now and that's the last statement. Now if he turns his hand from the role of punisher seeking vengeance, now that hand is turned in a sense of reaching out favorably. So he's just smacked them down, and so when he turns his hand now, and so many translations miss this, they don't understand the context of they all write that he's turning his hand against the people. No, he's just finished that. I've just now told you I'm smacking down my adversaries. I'm going to be separated from them. I'm going to punish them. And now he's speaking of his remedy. And so I will turn my hand favorably now upon you, deciding to remove your impurities in the manner of a natural laundry chemical which cleans. Your repulsive rubbish and your worthless divisions, all of which I will remove. That's the purpose of the Torah. Yahweh will clean us. He will purify us. He will remove all of the garbage that has been collected around our souls. It's like everything in Hebrew. The hand can strike down, the hand can uplift. It's all how you approach Yahweh. You can Yareh, come to revere him, or Yareh, live in fear of him. And so this passage, I think you have to view the hand being turned, because now He's desiring to remove our impurities. He wants to wash us clean. Our repulsive rubbish and our worthless divisions, he has chosen to remove. God's solution. Then he goes on to say, then I will choose to restore your judges as it was at first, and your counselors who provide advice and direction as it was in the beginning. Now, has God reestablished the Shabbat, the judges?
No.
Now, are there any Shabbat judges that are Torah-based in Jerusalem?
No, sir. None.
Not one, right? So this is a time, right? So when God says I'm going to restore, when I'm going to clean, I'm going to restore, I'm going to turn my hand the opposite direction, and I'm going to clean and restore, and then I'm going to restore the judges. He's talking about a day that we have not witnessed yet. Now, what's interesting, what this strongly suggests, since we know that God's going to restore his relationship with Israel and with Yahowah on the just prior to the day of reconciliations in year 6000 Yah, that what this suggests is that during the millennial Shabbat that follows, it's going to be a very Torah observant society, and the judges are going to be put back in place, which means that Yahweh is going to say, it's time that we go back for 1,000 years to the model that I wanted established, where if people are going to have quarrels, even covenant members are going to have disagreements, and if there's a disagreement, I'm going to reestablish the judges. They're going to use the Torah as the guide, and they'll resolve the disputes. And these are people which will teach those who are born during this period how to think, how to be discerning, how to resolve misunderstandings. They will be counselors who provide advice and directions, as it was in the beginning. So the judges were established by Yahweh to provide advice and direction, as it was in the beginning. Now we have a bad echo, so I don't know who was brought online there, but it's not working. Then he says,
I'm going to mute
then
them again.
afterwards, thereafter, for
was that James Ball? Was that the number that 706-516-5269? Hey, James, you got to turn off your speakers or whatever.
I don't know what that is, but it doesn't work with the feedback. Then afterwards, therefore, for you to approach, it will be called the city of righteous vindication and the city of confirmed and enduring truth. So Yahweh said, listen, I established Jerusalem as the source of teaching and guidance on reconciliation. It was the place that was right, where I established the means to justly resolve disputes. And you turned it into a bunch of whores as political and religious actors looking for bribes. And you ended up killing a bunch of people as a result. And then God said, listen, you are lost, and I'm going to take vengeance on those who led my people astray. But I want to resolve the issue with those who are willing to accept my hand, my offer, and I'm going to restore the judges. I'm going to restore the counselors who provide advice and direction, as it was in the beginning. And therefore, for you to approach, Jerusalem is going to be called the city of righteous vindication. It is the only place where the means to vindication occurred. So Jerusalem becomes Ir HaShadak, and it is the Wa'ir Aman, the city of confirmed and enduring truth. Not the Vatican, not Washington, D.C., not Mecca. Jerusalem. It was, and it is, the only place that matters. It's where Yahweh came to. It is where he will return to. It is where he's going to camp out. If your focus is on any place other than Jerusalem, your focus is misguided. If your focus is on any institution that isn't based in Jerusalem, if it's based on teaching and doctrine that came from any place other than Jerusalem, misguided. The only solution that matters, the only covenant that is worth keeping, comes out of Jerusalem. And is so important. Zion. Zion, the signs marking the way. By the means to exercise good judgment regarding the way to justly resolve disputes, shall ransom and redeem those who change their attitude and return the right way, justly causing them to become innocent and upright. So, again, the solution is that Yahweh enabled the mitzvah in Jerusalem. He fulfilled the first 4 mikra in Jerusalem. He's going to fulfill the last 2 in Jerusalem. And once again, Jerusalem is Zion. Yeah. It's not about...
Yeah, well, clearly that's the city of Dode. It's coterminous with it. Right. Is JB, do you have him on the line now? He wanted to ask something.
Yeah, he's on.
Go ahead.
I'm here, Larry. I'm here.
Go ahead and step up to the plate there, pal.
So you can hear me, correct?
Yes,
absolutely.
All right, let me give you a little background first. You kind of follow Bridget, so we're both connected to you, Larry, on Facebook. Okay.
You travel in good company. That's all I can tell you there, okay?
Well, and I'm not on some of the back channels as she is, but we're avid listeners, she more so than I. Although, you know, we met about almost a year and a half ago, and she was the first person to introduce me to Yada Yahweh. Okay, so let me just give you a little backstory in that I'm the perfect little Christian. I got off into a little bit of the Hebrew because I found some people who were pretty much, I would call them messianic Jews. I mean, they accepted that Christ was the Messiah, but they were still very much rooted in their Christian faith, so they were kind of walking the line.
Yeah, we'd call them messianics here.
Yeah, it's a blend of rabbinic Judaism with Pauline Christianity. They just took the 2 religions and blended them together.
Okay, yeah, which describes a lot of the people that I've been around. Very influential, very charismatic people, and I guess as a justification, I found a nice little home there because I was able to, cling to my Pauline faith and accept and explore the festivals and explore, lots of different things that made sense according to my English translation, all of which I've been.
But rationally, how does one cling to Paul when Paul not only denounces the Torah, but, just says in essence that if, you're circumcised, you can't be saved, and if you're observing Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, you can't be saved. Now, I just don't understand rabbinic Judaism and Pauline Christianity mixed together.
Well,
they're literally oil and water.
They're not mixed. This is a walk based on ignorance. Okay, so these are people who are pretty content and pretty complacent. So I'm not justifying.
Yeah, I understand that it's appealing. So I'm not being critical here. It's just it's very difficult when you're in the midst of it to see how these 2 things are in direct conflict with one another, and how people can endorse things, accept things that are in absolute conflict. It's just always fascinating.
Well, I think that the quest becomes, to find deeper and deeper truth, and I think that most people, the complacency wins over because they tend to go back to family raising, they tend to go back to their understanding, the ignorance. Ignorance is bliss in some regards, and religion so much so. And in this walk, in this question, you watch the sunrise every morning. I question life. I question love. I want to know my God. I want to know my Creator. But then I go back to what I've always been taught, and then I've been introduced to these little pieces and tidbits of things which makes me yearn and hunger for more. And not everybody finds you, Greg. Not everybody finds Yada Yahweh. Not everybody has a Larry in their life, Okay, so until we're introduced to this thing, I'll just tell you, when I met Bridget and she introduced me to these things and to Yada Yahweh, I mean, I've read through Yada Yahweh twice. I read Questioning Paul twice. I have not got into tea with terrorists. I'm a very much student of religion. I was told very long ago by a Buddhist martial arts teacher of mine that, it's all a circle, and no matter where you get on this wheel, if one is to justify and understand his own religion, he must fully understand and grasp too, to have a basis for comparison. And if you get on this wheel, then eventually you will circle around, and in the middle you will find God, no matter where you get on. So that was a nice little happy, complacent place for me at the time.
Yeah.
But it sent me all the way through Eastern philosophy. It sent me through, of all the Buddhist literature, there's 1,100 books, 300 have been translated into anything close to English. And of the rest, you had to go into Tibetan, Pali, Sanskrit, dead languages. I was a student of archaeology. I was very much into Egyptology and archaeology as a child. I wrote my first book report in hieroglyphics, which is a phonetic, and, it's a phonetic alphabet, but it's also pictograph. So, King Tut, Tutankhamun, is 3 syllables, Tutankhamun, and the Ankh in the middle, meaning everlasting life. And these are the people who held captive Jerusalem. So you understand that this,
Right. Interesting. There's a Buddha named Ashura. Ashura, that's like one of the worst possible names according to Yahweh. It's right up there with holy, Anyway,
it is. But understand that I've been through the religion, I've been through the language. And so, meeting Bridget and being introduced to you, Craig, and to Yada Yahweh, and to these truths. And I started with questioning Paul because that seemed like the most rational place for me to begin. I went through this, and it changed my prayer life. It changed my prayer life to, Father God in heaven, Jesus, everything else, to Yada Yahweh, everything that I knew how to say. I included everything just to make sure that I was being heard. And then I had a real problem with, in Jesus' name we pray, and the whole thing. And I learned so much. And my eyes were open to so many things, but it caused major conflict because even the way I prayed for my child and my family and my mother and people that were going through conflict, that was my first conflict, okay? Was my prayer life. And understanding
and questioning Paul is tough love.
Well, okay, so I'm a very, I'll play against my own ego right now, and I'll just say that in my life I've been a teacher. I taught Bible studies. I was a tattoo artist for 21 years. I had a Christian fish on my tattoo sign. I had every youth pastor in the world flying in to get tattoos, and I had every elder, pastor, and bishop in the world stopping by to cuss me out. I mean, this is kind of where I came from. It was a fun life.
Yeah.
Of course,
that fish, the Christian fish is really the sign of Astarte. It's the Christian fish is actually a vagina. It was the part of Astarte's, the Mother of God and the Queen of Heaven, being a fertility goddess, and so it was when the Christians adopted it. It had no clue that it was the sign of Astarte, and it was designed as a vagina.
And then, there's the Lord, the mix-up of all the religions and the hodgepodge of what we have to deal with now. And I was told the old story of, Christians passing, not knowing who was who and who was against and who was foe, who was a friend. They would take their staffs and they would draw half of the fish, and if the other person completed the other fish, then we knew we could talk.
And, of course, it's Astarte. That's who they were. They were saying, we're tied in with Astarte, Mother God and Queen of Heaven. And of course, Astarte, Mother God and Queen of Heaven, plays a leading role in Roman Catholicism, which was Christianity for a better part of 1,500 years.
And it does. And so again, back to the research. And I'm not going to throw Hollywood into it, but you have the whole Da Vinci Code and all this other stuff, and it opened up Pandora's box for a lot of people. I was one. I mean, it was a very moving film. It was for somebody who's inquisitive and educated and who is an intellectual seeker. It begged more questions than answers, obviously. But it sends people down the rabbit hole.
Nothing of the Da Vinci Code is true.
Oh, I know, but I mean, like I said, but to the unintroduced,
but it's presented in a very incredible way. Right.
Well, again, to the blissfully ignorant, it opened doors and it sent people down a lot of rabbit holes, and it somewhat helps people to educate themselves. Not everybody finds you. Not everybody finds Yada Yahweh. Not everybody has this conflict with their prayer life, and not everybody takes it as seriously. But here's my thing.
Yeah, of course, Yahweh never promotes prayer anywhere. I have no prayer life. I haven't prayed in 12 years. I will never.
And by the
pray.
way, I wish that there wasn't a me in this, because I try to be transparent in the sense that the only goal here is to convey what Yahweh actually said as accurately, as completely as possible, and then encourage thinking about what he had to say. But the only reason there's a me in any of this is that there are prior to writing Yada Yah, there were very few people, if any, in the world that were taking Yahweh at his word and were trying to accurately and completely convey what he had to say. So it was really
but
by
I've been down that route in my own message to me. I've been down this road, and you can't make yourself invisible as transparent as you'd like to be. Your personality, Larry's a personality. You're a person who's done the homework. You're a person who blazes trails. You make wide the path for some of us who, these paths have been closed off for so narrow for so long. So, I mean, we have to, I learn about you. I'm a businessman. I'm a marketer. I know, so your past, your history, your business past and everything else, I mean, I knew who you were before I knew who you were, if that makes any sense. I knew who you were from the online business and from the failure and the collapse of that and all of the stories that were written. Long before
which again turned out to be a tremendous benefit. Had it not been for that, I would not be here. Until you've been publicly humiliated and essentially crucified, there would be no way that you would take on religion and politics. I mean, because you have no friends. I mean, you're completely out there, and with the whole world hating what you have to say. And then the other part of it is that had it not been for the financial benefit of taking the last company public, I could not have devoted 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day to doing that.
And I get that. I mean, I've afforded myself much luxury in life, and money is what it is. But the freedom that it provides for one to chase after one's own pursuits and one's own passions, money's a good thing. In that, and I get all that. And I don't know how you're living. I don't know how Larry's living. I don't know. I don't know as much as I should. This call is probably a little bit premature, but I just wanted to call and play the devil's advocate, so to speak, on one thing. And I need an answer. Okay, because everybody is walking in the knowledge that they have now. Larry, you're walking in the knowledge very boldly, publicly. Okay, Craig, obviously, Lord, you've taken the world's burdens on your shoulders and you've made yourself damn near a martyr. You know what I mean? For the cause.
I don't feel that way, but certainly I've been.
But do you understand my perspective of where I see you, your past, your history, why you do this every week, why you've gone through so much turmoil and trouble to do the work that you've done. I mean, none of us can afford the luxury of doing what you've done, so we have to have some sort of a mentor. We all get to be prodigies of something. We all get to be.
Yahweh likes to work through people, so and the people that he works through are usually extraordinarily flawed. That's no big deal. That's something Yahweh does routinely.
It's no big deal, but still you're a leader and a guide. Okay, to some of us, you're the only leader and the guide, and you provide clarity. You provide, like I said, you very much narrow the path for us. Not so much that the path becomes so narrow because we're incapable, because you absolutely provide clarity, direction, and guidance. And for some of us, for myself, for Bridget, I mean, we follow. You're a man. I mean, we understand where you sit and your humility and everything else that you do, and the tireless dedication that you provide to what you've done, and the dedication to the revisions and the revisions and the revisions and the studies and the hours. You talked a couple of weeks ago about, just one verse. One verse. It's taken me, I've spent 2 weeks on this, 7 words.
Yeah, I wanted people to hear that. You know why? Because I get all these requests for where do I get an accurate translation? I mean, of everything. Yeah, of course, you and I both know that does not exist. That means that you have to, dig, and then when you're digging, and of course, these kinds of shows, believe it or not, even though they're very informative, they put me to sleep. Because, when Craig starts getting into example, cohortatives and stems and hippo, I'm over here snoring. Really, I'm pinching myself.
Yeah,
because I can't do that.
I ran into a hippo stem today.
A hippo stem.
Sorry.
No.
A hippo stem today that was so magnificent, I got goosebumps. And it was when Yahweh was telling, Yahweh introduced the concept of his Torah to Moshe during their first meeting. Moshe says, I don't speak well, and Yahweh says, who designed the mouth? I'm going to be there guiding your mouth. And then Yahweh says that I'm going to yara you. And he wrote yara, the verb, which means to teach and to guide.
Like in Jerusalem.
I'm going to yara you, which means I'm going to give you the Torah. And he wrote the verb in the hiphil stem. Now you might say, well, what does that mean? What that means is the hiphil stem, the subject, enables the object to become a secondary subject. So Yahweh says, I'm going to yara you, Moshe. That means that Yahweh turned Moshe into an
the
implement
Torah
of his teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
He made Moshe the same as Yahweh relative to the Torah teaching and guidance of Yahweh.
Astounding find. That's astounding.
Yeah.
And of course, when we read the Torah, so much of it's Moshe.
Right, the stems matter.
Yeah.
And here's a guy that said, I've got a thick tongue, I've got an unresponsive mouth, and God's saying, I'm going to turn you into a living embodiment of my teaching. Don't sweat
I'm going to teach you and turn you into the teaching.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not just teaching you, I'm turning you into a secondary me. That's pretty cool. Now, because that was in the hiphil stem, I immediately went to the fact of God never makes a promise to anybody that doesn't apply to everyone under the same circumstances. So if we're willing to walk and engage with Yahweh and to share his Torah teaching, then that means that he turns us into a secondary him. That's what that means. You know, Noah wasn't the only person invited on the ark. Adam was the only person invited to live in Eden. Abraham wasn't the only person invited to participate in the covenant. We're all invited under the same set of circumstances. And so with Moshe, he's not the only person that Yahweh yarad with the hiphil stem. The rest of us too. All of us.
Right, but go ahead. You had a bone of contention.
Okay.
You had a bone of contention here with something, and I'd like to get it fleshed out. If it's okay.
What's your concern? Yes. You said you had a concern.
There was
play devil's advocate.
Okay, well, thanks for coming back to that.
Sure.
Okay, and I'm talking to people, you know, everybody in the field, everybody's called in, everybody that's there now, Larry especially, Craig especially. I mean, we were all good Christians at one point, right? According to the world standards. I mean, we all came from a place where we conformed, we walked the line, you know, we said the prayers, we went through the doctrine, the dogma was accepted, and, you know, we were okay at that point until we learned a little bit more about the truth, and it drug us down the rabbit hole. And here we are today. You said something about forgiveness before, or the lack of forgiveness, and are we supposed to forgive? And Larry, you were adamant. Craig, you sort of supported what he had to say about forgiveness. And forgive me for going back to some sort of appalling place in my life, because so much of the New Testament, you know, has been so much of my life for many, many, many years. I've been sort of divorced from that for quite a few, but it's still very much ingrained in me. And so this, you know, love your brother as you love yourself, you know, forgiveness, you know, forgive as I have forgiven you, and these are English translations. Yeah. Okay, but how...
There is, by the way, there really isn't a Hebrew word for forgive, and I mean, forgive is probably not even a good English word because it's got too much religiosity associated with it.
Correct.
What God really says is, I'm going to vindicate. I'm going to view you as right. Right, and the vindication is by the mitzvot, which are the means that Yahweh has to be able to justly resolve our disputes, and so his means to make us right is to cover us with his light, and where there is light, there is no darkness. So the darkness that was once associated with us is obliterated, which makes us right with him. So it's
okay, and through that veil we are seen, and I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but Yahweh just said in what we went over here. I just want to point this out. He said, make fun of them, rib them, make fun of them. You know, that's not an act of forgiveness or anything else. And let's imagine. I'm just for the sake of simplicity. I've got 4 children. Let's suppose some guy raped and murdered one of my daughters. Okay. Well, if I can ever get my hands on him, I will skin him alive with a knife dipped in shit. And I promise you, that's exactly, and I mean it, word for word, what I would do to him. Now, you may say, wow, that's not a very kind thing. No, it's not. It's meant to be vicious. And I got to tell you, it would be overlooked.
Yeah.
I would be an irrational person to say, I love you, I forgive you. This would be a sign of insanity.
You look at Dode. Dode was a guy that caused one of his senior generals to get killed in a battle that he never should have sent him to. But he sent him there deliberately hoping he would get killed so that he could claim his wife. You know, and this guy already had a harem with more women than he could even remember their names. And he wanted one more. So he essentially caused a man to die. And he, in doing so, which was a wrong thing to do, but yet God never says that he stopped loving Dode because he did this horrible thing. God says, you know, what you did was wrong. But the reason that Dode wasn't authorized by Yahowah to build his house is God says, you know, you've spent too much of your life in war, killing people. You're a man of war. And my house is not going to be built by a man of war. He says, now, I love you dearly. As far as I'm concerned, you're righteous, you're perfect, you're my son. I love you dearly. But you're not going to build my house. And so, if you look at Dode, he was the most flawed guy that you could ever have. But Yahowah perfected him because that's the purpose of the Torah. If you observe the Torah as it was intended, and you accept the terms and conditions of the covenant and attend his mikvah, you are exonerated. You are looked at.
You're also accepting the fact Yahweh is not a religious deity. You're understanding he lives outside this dimension. He's not omnipresent nor omniscient, as you point out. He's you know, you're no longer buying into delusions. You're living in a world of reality. And
those are easy concepts, Larry. Those are easy concepts for me to grasp, and
but then it all becomes very real. But why would let's say Yahweh want you to forgive some guy that raped and murdered your daughter?
Okay,
and what purpose would that play?
I'm asking for my own. Okay, for my own forgiveness and for people who used to walk with the path.
No reason for you to ask.
We're ignorant and anti everything we understand.
Like all of us
now, presently, all of us here. This is where we all started down the path, and yet, how do we reconcile, and this is what I need help with, I need to reconcile the fact that, you know, turning complete 180 from everything I knew, everything that I understood, and the walk of faith that I had, which was, you know, fairly righteous in its time and in its day, and in all those who chose to observe me. You know what I mean? I had a charisma, I had an influence, I had a way of speaking, I had a way of influencing people, I taught Bible studies. I quit because I decided, look, I've got the language down, I've got the translations down, I'm teaching people to get back into their Bibles, and it's a great thing because, you know, they're dusty, they're on the shelves, I'm posing questions, they're forcing people back into a relationship with God, is what I felt at the time. And I quit because I felt like, okay, what I know with my mind, I now need to relearn with my heart, and I'm nowhere near where I want to be. And this is, you know, 10 years prior to today. So,
well, just
you know,
let me say something right away. I mean that I'm catching, and Craig can back me up on this. Everything that we have done, you know, misleading people, which leads to death actually, and all these things. They're written in the imperfect.
Correct.
In other words, you cannot continue to do. You cannot continue to do.
Right. I taught Bible studies too, and I was highly sought after as a Bible student. The way that I would present the Bible, and I stopped doing it because I couldn't resolve the conflicts, and I knew that what I was saying was there were too many logical conundrums that were in conflict that couldn't be resolved, and I finally stopped doing it because I knew what I was saying was a fraud, and that the people who claimed to be the most devout Christians and most engaged in Bible studies were crooks and con men that were extraordinarily dishonest. So I just stopped doing it. Now, everything that Yahweh asks us to refrain from doing, like being religious, as Larry said, it's all written in the imperfect. So if you are deceiving people, you have deceived people via Bible studies, like I did. The moment you stop doing it, you're no longer guilty, if you will, of that issue. It's like you should not make a habit of murder. Moshe murdered a guy, but he didn't make a habit of it. And so, when I was in business, if you're not a bit greedy and covetous in business, you're not going to succeed. And right. And so, it's making a habit of doing the things that are against Yahweh's plan. That, like when he says, don't make a habit of committing adultery. If you've committed actual adultery, but you're no longer committing it, then you're not in violation of that. But beyond that, it has nothing to do with sex and has everything to do with religious infidelity. But it's not only that there is a period of time where it's written in the imperfect, so that God's whole concept, there's only two conjugations in Hebrew. His goal is to perfect the imperfect. But beyond that, Job was the most imperfect guy on planet Earth, and Yahowah said he's perfect. So it's by observing the Torah that God sees his children as perfect, because he has ransomed them and he adorns them in light. So from God's point of view, we are in fact perfect. He does not see any of our faults. It does not that he's forgiving them. He doesn't know them.
They don't exist.
They don't exist.
Okay,
I get that. And I get that
only after I get that, Larry. I get that, Greg, and I get that only after 4,000 pages of reading, through twice.
Right.
So, I mean, it takes a little bit of perseverance to be less ignorant at this point.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
that's why you'll notice that when I say regularly that being saved means nothing to us.
Well, I get that. I've been saved 42 times. I get saved a lot. Been there, done that.
Yeah, and we say that being saved means nothing to us because it is simply a byproduct of the relationship. And when you consider all the benefits of the relationship, there's not one of the 5 benefits of the relationship that is salvation.
Right. And I get that now.
That's a little bit beyond all that. That's that whole minimum I'm afraid to die thing. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Christians want to be saved.
And we don't have the time now. And thank you, all of you, for allowing me, and thank you, Larry, for answering the messages and getting me plugged in.
Oh, surely.
Yeah. Well, I've threatened this for a long time, and Bridget's like, no, don't call. But
I like Bridget, by the way. I mean, what contact I've had with Bridget, I like Bridget.
Well,
is that your wife or girlfriend or?
She's my girlfriend, and she's somebody who's when I told her, I understood a lot about the Aramaic. I mean, before we ever actually met face to face, we talked about this, and she said she had some very deep, dark secrets that she had to share, and there were some things that might strike me as odd. And she started to allude, not to Craig, but to some things. And I said, well, I was a student of the Aramaic, and I was a language student, and these things, and what better way to turn a woman on? I didn't know, and here we are. And she listens religiously. She plugs the headphones in. She drives every day. I mean, you're an everyday thing, Craig. And Larry, obviously, between Facebook and the podcast and the podcast.
Well, Craig is like a wise fatherly type to all of us, and we love him. And a day without Craig is like a day without sunshine. I mean, it's like Aunt Jemima pancakes without syrup.
I'm back into the Moshe mode. Unless you are admittedly flawed, you cannot engage with Yahweh. He will not use anyone that has any redeemable.
Well, then I'm your people.
God never picked anybody that was anyone.
Okay, but again, we are your people, Larry, me and Bridget, we're your people. We're kindred,
you're Yahweh's people. We are just conduits.
But I mean, and I've threatened to call in. I'm sort of an intellectual, like I said, I'm a language student. There's so much more that I want to say, And I know we don't have time now, but, you know, right now, you know, there's a difference between understanding and observation between me and Bridget. We have this conflict, okay? She's, you know, spent the last week looking into, you know, all of these calling out times and looking at these things because we're coming into October. So we have a lot of things to deal with. And like I said, I've dealt with a lot of the Messianic Jews, the people. Right. So I'm of the opinion that observation and understanding of these things means to actually practice. Go again. Y'all brought this up, which is why I called tonight. You know, are you supposed to bring this lamb, this thing into your house for 4 days?
No.
You know it, bond with it, have a relationship with it.
When you get into that's part of the problem that we all have with the Messianic Judaism is that they want to they don't observe the Torah, they want to keep the Torah. And it's not about...
And you can't.
It's about observing. Observing is to use
He even
your
says
eyes
his Moed Mikras for the purposes of what? Understanding.
Yeah.
Says
Understanding.
He says it.
Right. So you can
It's
observe
a part
everything in the Torah and understand why was the lamb brought into the home.
Understand this, guys. Larry, Greg, we both, and probably, you know, if there's 1,000 people listening, if there's 100 people listening, you know, let's go back to business. So let's take 5% of that. There's 5% of the people who are listening now who are trying to understand what this understanding, this observation of these calling out times mean. Okay, so we understand the Passover, we've done the work, we've done the homework, we've done the, you know, so I'm not going to slaughter anything and fling blood all around my door. You know, I'm not, that's not what I'm saying. But she, you know, I mean, she looked up and I said, give it a week. Talk to me about this, and are we merely to understand and observe and recognize these calling out times, or are we to actually participate?
Well, understanding that Towrah is, you know, he even said that Lot was a foreshadowing of Towrah. That's going to be for the people that are sharing Yahweh's words, the trumpets, if you will.
Yeah, but you know, you look at the Lot situation.
You look at the Lot situation. Kind of where we're at.
He's asking Lot to by Lot. He's sending a message. If you don't walk away from the Sodom and Gomorrah of this world, you're going to die. And with Lot, his wife longed for it, looked back for it because she didn't want to walk away from it, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. And then you look at Lot himself. Lot was hugely flawed. I mean, here's a guy that tried to give his virgin daughters to Moloch, and then had incest with his own daughters. I mean, this is a real scumbag. He was only spared.
Craig, you've done the homework, and so you understand that I understand the lineage of Lot. I understand the bloodline. I understand where it all. I mean, you know, I've
Lot
not
was
done the
only
research.
spared Sodom and Gomorrah because of Abraham.
Well,
it
I
meant
think
something to Abraham,
everything to
and
do
so
with
Yahweh took care of his guy.
Correct. So, you know, I tell Bridget to go and look, and let's understand this. Trumpets is coming up. Let's, you know, we're kind of out of place because, you know, I'd like to start at the beginning. But, you know, understanding and observation of these things. And so, you know, even today, you know, Larry, I mean, you know, I'm at work, she's at work, she sends me, you know, videos and sound bites of people playing the shofar, you know? And so I don't want to go across the street to my little goat farm in the neighborhood and, like, hack off a goat's horn and try to figure this all out. You know, but
if you don't want a shofar, you can buy one.
I know, and I believe me, again, the Messianic Jews, there's a shofar on every shelf of every place I've ever practiced my religion. They're around
I don't have one. I don't have one, by the way. Never blown one. I don't have one. I do like the sound of them, though.
But you understand that, so, you know, I'm compelled to understand at a very much deeper level. And she's like, you don't need to have a shofar and play a shofar, but let's just understand what that means. And I'm the guy that's like, I don't want to go kill the goat across the street, but then again, you know, I can probably find a horn somewhere.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the goat or the lamb across the street. It has nothing to do with the horn. It has all to do with what that represents and why the ram's horn is important.
So again, this is probably a topic for another day.
Well, on every Yobel, they, as an example, would cast around the horn of the lamb, wouldn't they? Every 50th year.
I've got to go, but I'm gonna leave you with one thought, and that is that when by studying and observing the Torah, the Navi, the prophets, and the Mizmor Psalms, when doing that, I came to the conclusion in doing it that God wants us to observe, and the word observe means to use our perception of sight to read, and He wants us to listen, which means we use our mouths to pronounce what He has to say, so we hear it resonate in our ears. That He wants us to do those things regarding His Torah. He does not have a word for obey, so He most certainly wasn't asking us to obey the Torah, but He routinely asks us to observe it and to listen to Him. So I came to the conclusion that therefore we ought to come to know what He has to say and understand it, and then respond based upon that understanding. Then I had the opportunity to translate the 119th Mizmor or Psalm, which is now Dode's explanation on how to properly observe the Torah. And Dode stated exactly the same thing. And so if the one person that God loved more than anyone else on earth told us how to observe the Torah, and that observation is exactly what I'm sharing with you, that it had nothing to do with obedience or doing these things, but had all to do with understanding what the Torah says, then I think we're on pretty solid footing.
Well, can we dig a little deeper in that and on some future podcast? Can we, schedule that? Can I call in? Can I be the devil's advocate? Can I be the uninitiated, the uneducated, the people who are following your footsteps, who are treating you as a mentor? Right.
Sure. Yeah. And
because
by the way, I do not want to be a mentor. I do not want to be a teacher. I do not want to be a leader. My only role is
you just share
I want to be.
what you learned.
I want to be a sharer. I want to. My
Okay,
own edification. I want to learn what Yahweh says, and then I want to share what He says. And if there are insights that I perceive along the way based upon what He has shared, and I'm growing this. I only do the translations because I want to know so that I can understand, and then I want to share what I've come to know and understand. That is it. Right, and I do not claim to be infallible, don't claim to be anything other than someone who loves the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms, and who tries to accurately translate them and then think about them and understand what God is saying. And in that light, it is my conclusion, and I think, in fact, I am certain that it is also Dode's, that what God wants us to do is to observe so as to know, and then to make connections so that we understand, and that is the proper way to observe the Torah.
Okay, well, can I play I'm not even going to use the word devil's advocate. Can I play the 5% of the people who are listening to you that don't call in and let me question and doubt and be corrected and correct and let me be a thorn in your side from time to time?
Yeah, well, I don't have any thorns.
That's not a good one.
And I don't have a devil's advocate.
They're probably the thorn in the side
that I respond to.
Sorry about that, guys.
And I'm going to be a broken record in the sense of,
That's fine, Greg.
all I can do is share with what God says and what He means. And when Larry says and he quotes Yahweh saying that the purpose of my Moed Mikra is to advance understanding. When Yahweh said to the chosen people, I'm going to neglect your children because you've neglected my Torah. When God says I tried to raise you as my children and you rejected me, and you read that in context, and people that chose to be religious as opposed to engaging in the relationship, God's perspective is always the same, and it becomes this simple. He wants to be our Father, and we can be part of His family and receive all the benefits that He's offering if we, in fact, come to know Him and accept Him as our Father, and then accept the conditions that He has outlined to be part of His covenant. It really is no more complicated than that. All the rest of it
Well,
are shadings and insights
it's only
and perspectives
complicated
on that.
because of our past, Greg. It's only complicated because of our past and where we came from to get to this place.
Right. That's why God hates religion.
And I want what you described. I want what you described. And I like where you are in the world. Larry, I like where you are in the world.
But you do. But if you're going to be at that same place, you have to be willing to let go of all religion. For example, you need to forget about worrying about. Stop praying. Stop worried about being saved. Just get to know Yahweh. Get to know who He is and understand what He's offering.
Can you, in a public forum, in this podcast, from time to time, deal with me being here?
Yeah.
To ask these questions, to help lead and guide me, and to correct me, and to instruct me as you have been led, and as you have learned, because you are blazing trails, right?
Yeah. The whole
for some of us
that we just shared for Yahowah is the same.
Well, and
everything God says, particularly if you read Observations, which I think now is the first 10 chapters are probably at the BlessYahowah.com site that Richard has, and I think they're also on the Torah.
No, we've been there. We've been there.
YHWH site of right, and I think there might even be on Frank's site, Power on High. And so, if you look at the Proverbs, the Mishpat that it begins with, they're very, very clear and simple approaches to how religion works, why God is opposed to it, and how we really have to disengage from politics and religion to benefit from what God is offering. And the more we are willing to let go of that and remove ourselves from that, the easier it is for us to process and accept really what He's offering.
And that is our desire. That is my desire. I believe that's Bridget's desire, and we're connected to Larry. We're connected to you, and you're a part of our everyday life. I mean, we don't go a day without reading, without listening. So, I mean, like I said, I don't represent the majority of people, but I do represent a small percentage who are here, and I respect and I appreciate it.
Let me just finish because I do need to go. What I would say is that when we first come to recognize that all religion is fraudulent and misleading, it's disorienting, and it takes a while to process that and to recognize how much of our lives are corrupted by politics and religion and patriotism and all of these things, and it takes a good long time to recognize that, and it's cathartic because it so divides you from society and even from family members. It's divisive.
Correct.
And so that takes it took me a while to realize that I should not say Lord, that Lord is satanic, and that I should not speak of a renewed covenant, that there is no such thing as a renewed covenant. It took a while to recognize that God does not want us patriotic, and so that's part of it. And the other part of it is that coming to know Him and what He is offering is not instantaneous. There is no short, quick answer. He doesn't want it to be that way. He wants learning to be an eternal experience. And so you don't begin this process with a degree of confidence. Larry and Kirk and James and I have absolute and total and complete confidence because we have been with Yahowah for a long time, and we've listened to and studied what He said and found what He has said affirmed and reinforced in so many ways that after a period of time, and it's not instantaneous, it's years in most cases, we've gone from developing a base of knowledge and beginning to disengage from the source of corruption, and over time you get to the point where you're just relaxed. You're very comfortable in understanding who Yahweh is and what He's offering. And,
okay, well that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking.
But you don't get there quickly. It's cathartic to leave religion. Yeah. It's all cathartic to do all of this.
Today, the fact that I'm here and the phone call today has not been a very quick process at all. We're probably 2 years in the making. Speaking with you personally, and I appreciate that, Larry.
Oh yeah, sure.
Thanks for allowing me.
And by the way, I've seen folks that like Swolchi was an example. My good buddy Ken Powers, another example of
we all Bridget and I have
people
done all
that came a long way in terms of knowing Yahowah, and then reverted back into a form of Christianity.
But it seems also that he's coming, or it seems also that he's coming back around at this point.
I hope so.
There's been some movement.
I hope so.
Well,
yeah, I wouldn't do myself justice without studying the anti-Craig at this point. So yeah, we know him. We're in contact, and I want to know everybody's opposed to you and what you have to say as well. But super intelligent. But seems to be coming back around lately. So we're following very closely. We're following very closely in our lives.
I hope he does.
And our children's
and
lives.
It's going to be difficult. And I understand it's difficult that the questioning Paul, recognizing that Paul was the plague of death, for somebody who still spends an enormous amount of time with Christianity and in a church, is a very, very difficult thing to do.
Well, we're not. And so we're not there, but like I said, I only represent a small percentage of people, but there is a hungry and a yearning crowd, and I appreciate the time that
you've got a lot of stuff to do, because it's not just Christianity; it's Messianic Judaism, and it's also a little bit of Buddhism. You've got a lot of stuff to jettison. A little bit of Egyptian. Archaeology, and like my youngest son was an archaeologist by passion. I mean, he's now a month away from getting his PhD in organic chemistry, and he's a covenant member now. But his passion was also archaeology, and to come to recognize that almost all of those buildings that he was interested in seeing were religious edifices to false gods. It's difficult to let go when you have a passion for something.
Well, it's hard, and I'm just want to tell you, I've been down a year and a half, 2 years of this road with you, Craig, with you, Larry, with Bridget, with some expanded, consciousness here, and it's been difficult, and I just want to be the voice of that to the people who are listening that are not me, and I appreciate you affording me the time and allowing me to call it.
Yeah, it's difficult for all of us. It was difficult for me. Embarrassing.
Okay, well, again, you get to play mentor in that. Any 2 steps you took ahead of the path before me, is much appreciated.
Okay. All right. Well, good. I'm going to call it a night, fellows. It was good to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Talk to you next week.
Okay. Thank you, Jimmy. Bye-bye.
Enjoy your Sabbath.
Thank you. You too.